security assessments and testing. And this is a pretty cool domain. If you've ever done an assessment of any kind, they can be super detailed or super quick and dirty. And I say that based off of, usually you get what you pay for. And a lot of times with security assessments and testing, it really comes down to, what exactly is the scope. But oftentimes, whenever we're in the assessment business, we typically will say, I trust you, but let's verify it, right? And so we want to try to hire the best people. If we're practicing security, we want to definitely put together policies and procedures and protect our systems with state-of-the-art technology and practice security. And even the best in the business out there, which I would put myself pound to pound with anybody in the world on that. That's right. That's what I said. Even the best in the business doesn't know everything. With state-of-the-art controls, there hasn't been a system that we've been hired to do an assessment on where we haven't been able to find some sort of holes in. And the question is can we penetrate those holes and actually do a proof of concept for an exploit? So unless the organizations are continually trying to assess themselves and constantly trying to improve their security posture, it's likely that not only will we as the white hats be able to go in and find some bad things, but the bad guys are either already on the network or are close to being on the network. And so with this domain, it starts to talk about different things that you need to be aware of: auditing, penetration testing, vulnerability assessments, different types of controls that are put in place whenever we're doing any of these types of testing. And it really starts to make you wonder, when was the last time that your organization has had a really good test? And so let's go through and talk about some of these concepts here as we start to talk about security assessment and testing. And so right off the get-go here, you can see a common theme. And again, I said it, I think, the first day, and I'm saying it again. You're getting Pete and repeat here, right, with me, that what is in some of the first couple of days of us going through and actually starting to get to know each other, but also get to know the curriculum. What is one of the things that we keep seeing over and over and over again is identify assets, right? And it's kind of silly. We just got a call last part of last week. We're taking over a 60-person company managed security services provider, MSSP, for 60-person company on November 1st. And we were talking with the previous MSP, and they could not provide us a current inventory or a current network topology diagram. And it's quite interesting to think about that from the high level. Like, the people that are responsible for taking care of your network don't even know what's on the network. And because of that, that's one of the first things that we want to do is identify the assets that are on the network. And specifically, when we do that, we can jump in and look at other things like policies, procedures, industrial standards that they're trying to adhere to. When's the last time that they've had certain things? And, once we kind of lift up the hood, I always say, and I know that it sounds kind of weird, But most of the time, whenever you're into doing assessments, really you're going open kimono with a lot of people. And I know that that sounds kind of weird, but you're showing your world to everybody that is on that assessment team, and then everybody who gets the report is going to know how ugly your baby is. And so, that's why I typically use that metaphor whenever I'm describing this, because usually it's pretty ugly. So let's take a look at some of these things and what they look like. So if you're developing an assessment program, what kind of testing do you need to do? Is it, are you checking the availability of any of the resources? Are you looking at criticality or sensitivity of information? Remember, we talked about all that. The likelihood, the impact, what do all those things look like? And how can we qualify it, right? How can we qualify the scope of the assessment? Because, shoot, if we're doing an 853 assessment, that's going to take anywhere from 8 to 12 months just to do that alone, right? If we're coming in and doing, a NIST 800-171, that might, filter down the scope of the assessment to something that's much more manageable, because there's only 110 controls in that one, as opposed to, the 450 plus that are in the NIST 853. So it depends on what you're doing. Security audits would be, you're going through and trying to find ways that you can go in and look for the bad things that are on the network. And I think that it really depends on what kind of audit it would be. Would it be an internal audit? Would it be an external audit? Is it a non-interested third party? And who's going to be doing that? Are they going to be doing it to the different frameworks here? Remember, we've already talked about these. Do they apply the principles of the control objectives for IT or the information security management program? I mean, what's your goals within these assessments? And so usually what we do is we have a scoping questionnaire that will outline some of the various things that we need to know before we can provide a quote for a particular customer. And when we're doing that, usually we need to know, are there any industrial standards that you need to adhere to? When was the last time you had one? What are some of the different operating systems that may be finicky on your network? I mean, we see it all the time. There's still corporations out there running 2012, Windows 2012. We see stuff, like sensors that on industrial control systems that, if we scan it with Nessus or any of our other scanning tools, it'll bring that thing down. Like it'll totally overwhelm it, just because it's not used to having that many simultaneous connections. And so, you're getting me excited here just to talk about some of these different assessment techniques and really the scoping of the assessment program, right? Because for us, as we go in, we need to know what exactly we're going to do. And so with any of these, there becomes a point where we need to figure out what it looks like and how we're going to manage those findings once we come back with them. And so it really figures out, if you can't afford it internally, an actual tool to do the scanning, then something like a vulnerability assessment would be able to give you what we typically call a reduction in the surface area. So if the attack surface is 10 miles wide and an inch deep on your network, and you're looking to do a vulnerability assessment, well, the vulnerability assessment alone is going to tell you all the ugly things that are on your network. But unless you actually follow up with the remediation, it's going to be super difficult for you to get everything done. And so what we try to do is we figure out, what are those requirements? What do we need to stay? What's in scope of the assessment? as far as assets are concerned, and then what's out of scope. What are we not supposed to touch? We tell you what tools that we have in our repertoire that'll be able to go and actually light you up like a Christmas tree. And then, what do we need to do to try to perform due care, right? And correct the vulnerabilities that we find. And so it's kind of interesting because the way that I typically will look at the different types of vulnerability assessments that are out there is it's kind of like a snapshot in time. Really, it's only as good as the day it was run, and then tomorrow, if we run it today, tomorrow it could be out of date. Because what it does is it'll probe the system, it'll look at the network, it'll look at applications for those vulnerabilities, for those weaknesses that could be exploited by the attacker. And so some of these high-end tools will find, a litany of different things. We have one of our clients that, is 11,000 users, and they have over 100 different servers. And so when we scan the servers, there's always a litany of new vulnerabilities that come up. And so the idea is we put on our good guy hat or our white hat, and we're able to go through and, based off of some of those requirements that we gather, put together a comprehensive plan that hopefully meets that customer's needs. And so, the scope is super important. Are we coming in blind? Do we have a little bit of information? What is it? What are we supposed to do? And from that, we can start to drum up what tools that we're going to use. Some of the things that you may not already know, and if you do, then just bear with me. There is a bunch of different open source intelligence that we can go out and gather. Based off of some of the common vulnerabilities that are out there, but also we can, prior to us doing the actual vulnerability assessment, we can go out and do a dossier, build a dossier on a target of evaluation. And when we do that, we start to figure out who are all the key players within the organization. We figure out, what job postings that they put out there recently. What type of attack surface that they have, what's in scope, what's out of scope. We go out to these common vulnerabilities and exposures, the CVEs, and figure out, what does that look like, and what are some of the new things that maybe we need to be aware of. If we're doing a firewalk, or we're testing a firewall, or 3 or 4 different public IP addresses. What does that look like? If we're testing a web application and not a firewall, then that'll be a different type of test. So keep that in mind as you're going through and starting to learn some of these things. And also, some of the best ones that are out there are shown on the screen here. I don't know about this one down here, but Nessus is something that we typically will recommend. Qualys is decent. Nexpose A or Nexpose from Rapid7. The open source ones like Nmap, OpenBoss, Nitco, you kind of get what you pay for. Usually the reporting in a lot of those open source tools sucks. And so usually, one assessment will pay for some of these other tools up there. And so if you do like, us, we probably do at least one new assessment per month, and then we do an assessment for each of our customers each month as well. So they pay for themselves in spades. So just keep that in mind as you're going through and kind of looking at what some of the realms of possibilities are out there. And so when the results come back, usually the issues are put up to the National Vulnerability Database and some of the Security Content Automation Protocol, or SCAP. And you see some of those down here, right? And some of you are familiar with some of these acronyms right here. So the National Vulnerability Database, if you haven't been out there in a while, that's the web address. Check it out. And the platform enumeration here, the CPE, is shown here as well. Both of those come from the NVD and are from NIST. Very helpful if you want to go learn. MITRE publishes the CVEs as well. Man, you can get deep into the bowels of those and really get overwhelmed with a lot of these. And then there's a scoring system. And typically, this is kind of a way that we provide to our customers, some of the different findings that we have based off of, the CVEs that we typically will show. Depends on what the different results are, but typically the report in the scoring system will come back with the findings based off of the different families of controls and however many controls that you were able to find per each of these specifically. And so it kind of would look like this right here. We were able to get access to the local network and adjacent network, as well as the entire network. And then, what does that look like here and the different metrics that we can apply to it. So the scoring system, it ends up putting together some metrics quantitatively for us to then showcase on a qualitative risk matrix, so we can actually plot it. Remember on our little heat map, right? That the one that had the red up here, the yellow in the middle, and the green down at the yellow in the middle, and then the green down here. And so we will usually plot these vulnerabilities by, the top 10 at 10. What are the top ones that we need to let the customer know based off of, where it kind of fits on this radar, if you will. And so it's really a method to the madness where we can essentially give them the what we think is the plotting on there based off of that metric that comes back. And so usually you can go out and use this CVSS calculator to allow you to do what you need to do. And you can go and find this online, CVSS, and it's published by NIST, so it's free. And so it really helps you with the vulnerabilities that you find and plotting them according to what level of risk that they have. And so, in this particular case, we just took a screenshot here of what we found and some of the base scores. And then, what we do is we share this with the customer to let them know. Some of the different formats that we typically see, and one of them is the SCAP here that you may be familiar with, the XCCDF, the Extensible Configuration Checklist Description format, is available for you at the NIST.gov specifications XCCDF in the SCAP format. So you can go check that out. In addition to that, there's another one that's called OVAL, and that stands for the Open Vulnerability Assessment Language. And this is just an open standard that presents the findings in a way that's uniform and allows it to report in that way based off of 3 assessment steps. So getting the system information, expressing the specific machine states, and then reporting those results. This NCP here is from NIST, and you can actually go and get a checklist as well for any security components that you're looking to test against. And so they have this repository that's out there that you can put the checklist type and then, what targets you're looking for. And then by you searching for specifics here, you can go in and actually get that checklist and cater it to your program, which is kind of cool. And so there is a life cycle. and this may look a lot like the NIST 853 lifecycle, but essentially, we're trying to discover vulnerabilities. We look at, what vulnerabilities and compare those to assets that the vulnerabilities are on. Depending on, how critical those assets are, we make them higher of a priority. Then we assess it, we report it, we remediate it, we verify it, and then we do it all over again. And so that is cyclic in nature and allows us to really handle these vulnerabilities in pretty good order. So if you're interested in going out and looking at some of the open source information that is out there for vulnerabilities, there's things like the exploit database, other things like the getting consensus on CWEs, the weaknesses and enumerations. Packet Storm is kind of a cool tool, as well as the cert.org from Carnegie Mellon, I believe, and then voldv.com is another one that you can go out and check.